sharing our stories connects us.
Coming through here.
Listen and be connected. Join us for the Conversation meeting weekly at the intersection of community and culture. Hosted by Mario Nunez and Joe King Carter. Hey, Joey. Big week this week. Hi, everybody. You're listening to WMNF 88.5, WMNF.org. If you're listening from anywhere in the world, my name is Mario Nunez. I'm one of your two hosts today. I'm seated, as always, alongside my broadcast partner. That would be you, sir. That's your cue.
That's me. Hey.
Hey, Joey. We're having a little feedback issue here in the studio. We're trying desperately to remedy that, but the show will go on. Today we are going to be talking to Carl Hiaasen, and those of you that have heard those promos all week are fully aware that Carl is with us here in spirit in studio, but absolutely with us on Zoom. But while we await to try to figure out, that's better, while we await to try to figure out if we can conquer this technological snafu, we're going to say, Joey, what was your week like last week? I know we always do this at the top of the show. Carl's there listening to us. We'll get to him in just a second.
Yes.
How was your? I mean, listen, buddy, you're still.
It was a wonderful week as a guy who's been
still on the
fighting.
net. There you go.
I'm fighting a very bad bug, and it's for those of you who know me, it's present in my voice.
It is, and so we refer to that in our Latino household as the gripe, or the grip for short.
The grip,
and so you've been suffering with the gripe, brother, for a couple of weeks now.
That doesn't sound good.
It doesn't.
Grip,
it doesn't at all. But I'm sure if you just eat enough chicken soup, and enough lozenges.
Yes.
And you'll get better.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just know
Thank
this.
you for asking.
Just know this, that with the heat that we're experiencing here in West Central Florida, it is oppressively hot outside. It is dangerously hot outside. And at night, when you go outside, should you have to, at 11:30, it's still 84 degrees with 100% humidity, and the heat index is 100. You know, I don't know how people that are having to live outside and,
tragic,
sleeping rough, as they say.
Yes.
Or the feral animal. I just don't know. Brother, my windows are soaking wet. The humidity on the windows from the cool inside and the hot outside.
Folks, stay out of the heat if you can, folks. And please stay hydrated. Hydration is very important.
That's the takeaway. And that's your public service announcement from Mario and Joe, as we do here each and every week.
Yes.
So without further ado, because our hour goes by so fast as it is, and we are so honored.
Yeah, let's get the man in here.
And thrilled to have been given the opportunity. Thanks, Sean Canan. Shout out to Sean for throwing us this bone.
Yes.
He allowed us the opportunity to get in contact with Carl Hiaasen's publicist, his people, as they say, and Carl joins us now. Carl.
Welcome, Carl.
Thanks for having me on. This is exciting.
It's exciting for us too, partner.
It's exciting for you. Well, okay, I guess it is.
I like that.
It certainly is for us, that's for sure.
The feedback is probably my fault, and I don't know how to fix it. So,
well, you sound good, so don't worry.
Yeah, no,
you sound good.
And listen, after a couple of minutes, we'll focus, and we won't even hear it.
Yeah, it won't matter. Yeah, our audience is eagerly listening. We promoted this show over the last week, and we are a community radio that has a large audience, but certainly many of the folks in our audience are big fans of yours and your audience too, and readers. So.
Joe, you know what?
We're excited.
You know what I thought about before we get too deep into the conversation? All week long, I've been excited to talk to Carl for a myriad of reasons. But one most important reason is that we're all Florida boys, man.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Joe, you grew up in Bradentown, otherwise known as Bradenton.
Yeah.
I grew up here in Tampa with a wink and a nod to Ybor City. And, of course, Carl's from South Florida, too.
Absolutely. And Carl and I may have a little more affinity because we're the same age.
I know. I'm jelly. I'm a little jelly.
We both remember the idyllic Florida that Carl so often describes. And it's...
Are you talking about Stuckey's and their pecan rolls, Carl? Is that what we're talking about here?
Oh, Stuckey's. Oh,
and then stuffed alligator? Come on now. Yeehaw Junction? We got you.
Yeah. No, and Carl's also talking about mangroves and spoonbills and...
Oh, my gosh.
Those things. But the point is, he's also... taking to task the development of Florida and the strangeness of Florida. So with no further ado, let me just say, Carl, what we always do here is start off with this idea of asking you about your beginnings. There might be a handful of people who maybe have read your books but really don't know you as a person. And this is your opportunity. So let's talk about where you grew up.
Well, I was born in Fort Lauderdale, and I grew up in a town just west of there. Or at least it was a suburb back then. Now it's a city called Plantation, which at the time I was growing up was at the very considered West Broward County. It was considered the very westernmost part of development, and it was, had been cow pastures and woods and everything else. And then now, if you look at it, it's sort of the geographic center of Broward County, sadly. But at the time, that was sort of the western fringe. So it was pretty a rural childhood for me. I mean, I spent every spare minute outdoors, and my friends and I riding our bikes all over the place, fishing and
glory days,
and doing all the things that Florida kids do. There was like Florida days. There was no. Obviously, there was no shopping mall. It was a big deal. Convenience. One of these little all-night convenience stores finally opened up, and it was sort of scandalous when my friends would ride our bikes there. My mom didn't want us to hang out. It was called U Totem. That was the name of it.
Nice. I thought you were going to go with Little General, but we had those up here. But
yeah.
It was U Totem, and it was a big deal. We sometimes didn't tell our parents we were there because they didn't want us to hang out with the rowdy element in U Totem.
Little
so it was obviously a long time ago. I have great memories, and it's sad that a lot of the places that I knew that way growing up they exist now only under concrete and asphalt, and it happened very fast.
Yes, absolutely. So you're growing up in that atmosphere, you and your family. Is there anything about that you want to share unusual about your family, or are they typical? How did you see that?
I mean, I think they were pretty typical. My mom had been a school teacher. My dad was a lawyer, and he worked. My grandfather was a lawyer, been in Fort Lauderdale, one of the oldest law firms in South Florida. He moved down in 1922 to when they started the law firm. So they've been around. And I mean, again, my childhood was it was just every chance I could get being outdoors. A friend of mine finally got a little boat with a small outboard on it. We'd carry it blocks and blocks and stick it in a canal and go, run around fishing for bass and that time baby tarpon and stuff. And it was, looking back on it, I don't know if I appreciated it as much as I should have at the time. But and also it goes so fast when you're a kid. It's so compressed, And
yes.
Then I got out of high school and I was at Emory University for a couple of years and then transferred to the University of Florida for the journalism program because I knew I wanted to write for newspapers.
Go Gators.
Go Gators, yeah. They had and still do a terrific journalism school. So back then it was back then it was a lot easier to get into University of Florida than it is now. I'm not sure if I would have made the cut right now, but at that point, if you were a Florida resident, you had a pulse and a driver's license, you were in.
Yes.
So it was just a great time, and I wish every kid that was born here could experience, at least the joy of being out somewhere where you don't hear a bulldozer.
Yeah, absolutely. I share this with you in a very meaningful way. I get it. In fact, I considered UF as a school. I didn't go there, but I ended up going to USF. But
Joey, let me ask a quick question of Carl, because
yes.
The idyllic setting that he describes, and it was idyllic to us here in Florida, especially. But as it relates, and you were either on the water because you had the water accessible to you, Carl, or like in my case, in my family, we were chasing a ball, whatever season ball we were chasing.
Sure.
Springtime, we were playing baseball, football and basketball, so on and so forth. Always at either the rec center or, if you had water, you were on water. But if you didn't, you did whatever else you could. And you typically stayed out until the street lights came on or until your father yelled for you or whistled for you, and then you knew it was time to come home. But bringing that full circle to today, we were out just yesterday, and I told my wife, I said, honey, I think my skin is spontaneously combusting. It wasn't this hot when we were kids, Carl. It wasn't this hot. All the concrete.
I don't remember it. Right. I don't remember this kind of heat. I know the first house we lived in Plantation, and this was would have been in the late 50s, early 60s.
Jalousie windows.
Jalousie windows. We had no air conditioning, and no ceiling fans. And I mean,
You had one attic fan, as I recall, to pull the air out through the windows. And thank God they get jealousy windows, because how did we survive that?
I don't know. I mean, we didn't even have the ceiling. I think we had floor fans that my mom put up in the summertime, but then we finally moved into a house that had air conditioning. It was like heaven, but right. It was just, I don't think, because I was out so much in it, I don't think it got as hot for as long.
There you go.
As it does now. I mean, and but I don't have any way to document it. Maybe I'm just getting older and I can't stand the heat as much. But
we're definitely doing that too. We're definitely getting older, and we're definitely getting a little.
I think
crankier.
You just touched on it, Carl. Because I tell you what,
the cranky part.
I was 13 when we moved to a house that had air conditioning, and I also grew up in exactly that situation, and I don't remember it being hot. And I think part of it is that our young bodies. We are now elder statesmen, and our young bodies were able to tolerate it at a much greater level. So let me ask you to continue that. So you're this kid out on your bicycle fishing and knocking around. And what time in high school, where did you start to make this decision to become a person who wanted to be a newspaper guy or a journalist or a writer?
Well, I knew I wanted to write from when I was quite young. I mean, when I was, we had two newspapers that came to our house every day. The morning paper was the Miami Herald, and the evening paper at that time was the Fort Lauderdale News. And I loved to read newspapers. And my mom said that I'd literally learned to read on newspapers, reading the sports pages. There was no internet, and you to see the box scores from a baseball game. You had to actually get the paper and look at the box scores every day. So, I mean, and I always thought it would be a kind of a neat gig to write. I always liked writing little stories and things. I had a typewriter when I was young, and I think I made the conscious. I went through a phase where, in high school or junior high, where I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian because I loved animals, and I worked in a veterinary hospital during the summers. I was, the guy with the mop. And the dog, the dogs peed in the waiting room. And I was also the guy when there was a really big, ill-tempered dog. I was the guy that said, "Okay, we go ahead and get Spike, bring him in if you would," that kind of thing. And I mean, I guess I still loved it, but what I realized was there's a whole lot of science involved in that course of study. A lot of and math. The curriculum at that time was. So I said, it was much more fun to write, so I was lucky. I knew at a young age. I wrote a little bit in high school, a newsletter, and then at both at Emory and the University of Florida, I wrote columns for the student newspaper. The first is the Emory Wheel, and the second is of course, the Independent Alligator that all Florida students know. And so I got to work for both of them and interned at the Gainesville Sun in the sports department. You can laugh, and luckily, I even back in the 70s, it wasn't easy to get a newspaper job right out of school. But I ended up at this newspaper in Cocoa, Florida, called Today, and now it's called Florida Today. But at the time, it was Cocoa Today, and it just been it was a newspaper that had started from scratch in the late 60s. It was sort of the beginning of the prototype for USA Today. It was Gannett. It was the same company, and the publisher lived right there in Cocoa Beach. And I was there for about 2.5 years before I went to the Herald, and I spent the rest of my career at the Herald. So I feel like I was lucky in the sense that I didn't have to move out of Florida. I had second thoughts about moving back to South Florida after the Herald offered me the job. I really, because every time I went home, it's changed so much. That just visually, just driving to my parents' house, I mean, I could just see the how overdeveloped it had become, and it was kind of depressing. So I thought part of me wanted to stay in Central Florida because at that time it was really like old Florida. I mean, it was pretty cool, but it would have been stupid to, I had at that point a 3-year-old, and so I was, I had to think of the family first. And my mom, my dad had died kind of suddenly, and my mom was back in Plantation, and I wanted to be closer to her. And so there were a lot of things that went into it. And also, the Herald was just a damn good newspaper. It was of the top newspapers in the country and one of the best news towns, for hard news and breaking news in the country.
And so at the Herald, I'm going to assume as many, because this is a thing that's happened throughout our country, is very often novelists come out of that kind of journalism background as a reporter or writer for newspapers. It's fascinating. It makes sense. Yeah. Because you're having to hit marks and hit a schedule, and you have to provide, and so it makes sense that these are great training grounds for writers. But the Miami Herald has produced a few.
Yeah, there was
something in the water down there.
They were good. First of all, there was a lot of talented people who wanted to come work in Miami. Who were up north and wanted to come down, and especially young writers, and they still do that. But at that time, it was just such an incredibly talented newsroom. I sat next to Gene Miller, who had won two Pulitzer Prizes, one for getting two guys off of death row that had been railroaded and clearly had nothing to do with the crime. I mean, and so that was almost like going back to journalism school. You sit next to a guy like Gene, and Edna Buchanan was the police reporter, the legendary police reporter. And I went eventually after. I was on the city desk, then I worked for the Sunday magazine, Tropic, which was a great thing. And then I went on the investigations team, and there was so much you could have had. We had a pretty big investigations team then, but you could have had doubled the size and not gotten to all the corruption that you could report on. There was so much of it. There was so much of this stuff. And there's more now, I promise you. But the problem is there aren't very many reporters left to cover it because newspapers have shriveled up and that's not just across the board. The circulation is so far down, and obviously the first thing they start to cut is the newsroom.
Yes. Yeah.
Youngsters, Carl, will never quite get the enjoyment of the tactile feel of newspaper and newsprint on your fingers, let alone the smell of newspaper. That's a lost and dying sense, and it's shameful because those of us of a certain age, we grew up with that. The newspaper. When you heard them throw that out there, 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, you knew what that meant.
Yeah, in my case, as a little kid, the New York Yankees still trained in Fort Lauderdale, and we call it Little Yankee Stadium. So, a Yankees fan. There was no Florida franchises at that point, right? And so, if you didn't have a transistor radio with the game on, or if you had to go to bed for school and you didn't get to hear the end of the game, you'd rush out in the morning to look at the box score, to see, what Mickey Mantle did or what Tom Tresh did. But the good thing is that you have the whole newspaper in your hand, and you learned, and literally you find out there's a lot more in there that's interesting and fun. And I was lucky. I made up my mind pretty early that I wasn't going to be an attorney. It didn't interest me the way it did, my grandfather. And now, ironically, my oldest son, who was insisted on he was journalism for many years and ended up on the investigations team at the Herald. He left, probably 10 years ago. He went to law school at night while he was working at the paper, got his law degree. He went to clerk for a U.S. district judge for years, and now he's an attorney in Miami. So it's come full circle. And my dad and my grandfather didn't live long enough to see that happen, but they'd be proud. I'm proud of him, too. He had to make a choice. At that point, people were getting pink slips in the newsroom. And his friends of his, and he watched it, and their lives were being turned upside down. And he had said to me, "Dad, I have to make a move. I've got, I had 3 small kids, and they all wanted to go to college, young kids, and it's a big thing. But he had to do something because you're watching your occupation wither before your eyes, and it was a very hard and sad decision he made, but it was the right decision for him and his family.
Mm-hmm. Well, and who knows what is touched in the DNA, by the way.
I've got to interject, Carl, because you mentioned something. It was buried in the lead there, being a Yankees fan. In 1962, I'm 4 years old. A lady down the street from me, who was a friend of the family and a seamstress, sewed a little baseball uniform for me. I had two older brothers, and so baseball was a theme in our family. Care to guess what number was on the back of that uniform?
7.
Yeah, which is, of course, 100% correct. And which also begs the question, hey, did you ever get the Mick's autograph?
No, I didn't. I didn't get Mickey Mantle's autograph. And I remember my grandfather used to take me to the games, and I stood at the fence one day, and it was spring training. And he must have been having a bad day, but I remember asking Elston Howard, who was the catcher.
Sure.
Yankees. And I must have been all of about 3 feet tall, and I just said, "Hey, can I have your autograph?" And he said no. And he said it in a kind of,
was it rude?
I backed away from the fence because I thought,
he barked at you.
That dude really doesn't want to give me an autograph.
He was having a bad day too, apparently, Carl.
Yeah. So I get it, but I never got any of that. The most exciting thing that happened when we were, not the most exciting, but a very exciting thing happened. Well, this is going to sound corny, but when we were kids, we found out that Bobby Richardson, who was a star second baseman for the Yankees back in the heyday, Maris and Mantle and all that. Because they were training in Fort Lauderdale during the spring, he bought a house in Plantation. And it wasn't right near where we live, but we rode our bikes all over trying to, like there's going to be a big sign in front.
Bobby Richardson's house.
Where I live. But we were such goofballs. But I said, well, Bobby Richardson, got a house in Plantation. And he was using it during spring training. But that's so we were big fans of that. And it was, and then, of course, they moved to the spring training at Tampa after Steinbrenner came in. But that same area where the stadium is now it's the big soccer stadium. The soccer team plays down there.
So let me just, it seems like to me that childhood you had, which I can relate to, was idyllic. It set you up for a certain kind of experience that eventually informed your novels because of your satirical take on development in Florida and those sort of things. And then the other thing is that you worked at this newspaper, which also introduced you to a world of corruption and strange characters. And are you the inventor of Florida Man? I'm not sure.
I don't. Long before the hashtag, I felt like it was a thing, but it would just assume that every weird story, the weirdest story of the day in America, it was just sort of, it became natural that it happened in Florida.
Right.
I didn't, in those days, again, pre-internet and before social media, it was just assumed something would come across the Associated Press wire, in the newsroom, like you see in the movies, and the copy editor would rip off the story and look at it, and it would be there was bizarre. It was just, and there was a lot of, and I'm not making fun of it, but there was a lot of crime, even in the 50s, organized crime had already discovered Florida.
We don't know anything about that up here. Tampa doesn't.
No, you would not in Tampa.
No, not anything to do with that. I plead the fifth. We plead the fifth.
Right, but the five mafia families, the old schools. They were already wintering down here, and Meyer Lansky had moved to Miami Beach. He'd be out walking his little dog all by himself. People would wave to him, so we were sort of primed for good crime coverage because that's what a newspaper is supposed to do, is cover that. And there was corruption going back to when. I'm sure when all these towns were first incorporated, corruption was nothing new to Florida, but when drugs came along, first the marijuana, but to a much larger extent the cocaine, you really saw a difference. There was a just in writing about it and covering it, there was a huge difference in the vibe between Florida fishermen who are smuggling pot in on their boats at night, and then
To the cocaine cowboys.
and then the plane started landing with cocaine on it, and those guys showing up. There was a big difference in the vibe. There was much more violent, and shootouts, and it was real. You could, at no point did you ever feel in danger walking around Key West when half the people there were running loads. But in Miami, when the cocaine started, there were a lot of ruthless characters in that scene.
We've seen the mini docs on that, and yes, the MAC-10 was in full use at that time.
Yeah.
Also, Carl, we're going to do a little station ID here in a moment, but
Okay.
before we do that, I wanted to say this, and if it happens to you, we will apologize in advance, but if our having you on our show today gives you, Carl Hiaasen, the conversation bump, and all of a sudden you become even more popular than you are, well, you can blame us for that. But at the same time, I mean, I just want to know, and you can flesh this out on the backside of the break, and you set it up perfectly with where you were going with the conversation, vis-a-vis the violence and all of the stuff. How did Oliver Stone? Here's the question: how did Oliver Stone get the jump on you with Scarface, man? Because it seems to me like you would have been perfect to tell us about Tony Montana. You know what I'm saying? Carl, think about that, and we'll do the station ID. You can answer that on the other side.
We'll be right back.
Okay, all right.
Hi, I'm Randy Zimmerman, and you're listening to The Conversation with Mario Nunez and Joe King Carter on WMNF Tampa, 88.5 FM.
And I'll follow the bump, the conversation bump that we're about to lay on Carl Hiaasen by saying, even if you didn't have anything to do with inventing the Florida Man, I suspect after this show you might. I'm just going to lay that at your feet because we might have to give you credit for that, Carl.
Yeah.
Well, I know that's kind of a dubious distinction.
Okay,
I think.
right.
But you mentioned the movie Scarface. Well, I mean, the first novel, when I started working at the Herald, I had an editor who was also a foreign correspondent named Bill Montalbano, who was dear friends of mine, and I was writing about the cocaine wars, and I had written a profile of a guy and whose name was Conrado Valencia. I still remember it, and he was from Colombia, and he was a hitman and a smuggler, and he'd been in and out of the Dade County justice system numerous times. Every time he just gave him a different name. So he had all these great mugshots of him with different names, and he was allowed to walk out the door, and he was loose. And Bill said, God, this is such good stuff. We should write a novel about it. And so we did. We wrote a book. The first three novels I did were collaborations with Bill, and the first one was called Powder Burn, and there was Conrado's nickname was El Loco, and it turns out he was like the first of 40 El Locos now, but he was the first one that we put in the paper. So we were able to, we did. That was not a satiric novel because Bill and I, it was really traditional because we were writing in different places, getting together, editing each other's stuff, trying to make, that was a green car in chapter 7, and now it's a blue car in chapter 8, fixing those little things. But we worked well together, and collaboration isn't always that easy. But there was a different style and a different voice. It was set up as a thriller. We actually had to know how it was going to end when we started the book. And I never now do that on my own novels. I have no freaking clue how they're going to end when I start them. But in those, it was good training. There were sort of outlines, but we had to know because there's so many moving parts. Especially he was in Beijing for part of the time, and then when he come back to Miami, we get together. So, but Powder Burn was the first one. It was not the one. It did not turn into the movie Scarface,
which was a great movie, by the way. As campy as it was, because Al Pacino's Cuban accent was horrific. Rocky Echeverria nailed it, but
I know he did. But that was the thing about that movie. I had trouble not chuckling because of the Pacino's
so bad,
accent.
Carl, so bad.
It was like, and it involved, the first part is during the Mariel boat lift, which, we all covered. And it was, when you think about it, 250,000 people now were migrating to South Florida and boats, some of them at gunpoint, some of them, but you can imagine that happening to a city now, and the city absorbing it and the state absorbing it. And I mean, it was just a tumultuous story to cover. But when the Pacino Yeah, I mean, I just had trouble when he was on screen because the accent. I thought,
It was worse. It was the worst. It was the worst.
Yeah, he's unlike any Cubano I've ever known. That's for sure.
No.
And then he has to juxtapose that against Rocky Echeverria, who's, Stephen Bauer's accent is strong. I mean, he is Cuban American, so
Yeah.
it didn't work. And this was 1980. I mean, it was less than a decade removed from his Godfather movie. So I mean, we were having a tough time making that transition. But now we watch it, and I think between my brothers, my nephews, and all of us in our family, we quote it all the time.
I'm sure Mr.
it's
Mr.
very, very
Pacino will not
quotable
care.
movie.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's incredibly quotable.
Yeah.
So I have a quick question for you, and I'm going to jump around a little bit. Carl, take this walk with me. The thought just jumped into my head. Did you ever worry in all the time that you were, developing your portfolio and starting now to really lay down book after book, where your people are waiting for the next one, Carl? People are just waiting for the next one. Did you ever wonder or worry about somebody like Kathy Bates coming into your life and taking you to the cabin? What's going on with Misery and James Caan? You know what I mean? That was terrible.
No. I had as
Any stalkers, Carl? Anybody that
Yeah, but over time, but my demographic is that the stalkers are not all that clever. I mean, I think that
Kathy wasn't either in the movie, although she wielded a sledgehammer pretty viciously.
Yeah, no, I've had nothing like that happen.
Good,
I mean,
good.
Obviously, as the books became popular and things got weirder, I mean, I get some unusual mail and occasionally something, somebody, but some of them clearly have, serious psychological problems. And the trick is you can't engage with those people because
Right.
Then it gets dangerous.
And I used to get a fair amount of prison mail.
People got time to read in there, Carl.
Yeah,
people got time on their hands.
So the trouble with writing back to one of them is that everybody on the cell block writes you the next week. And so I had to stop doing that. But I did have one of the books was banned in a prison in Texas. I can't remember which one. But I was laughing my ass off. I thought, well, what do you think? What am I exposing the inmates to? It's a humorous novel, and I guess the warden didn't like it. But I felt in a way kind of honored. Anytime you anytime you write a book that's banned, which is easier to do in Florida now.
Today, yeah, sure.
But it helps sales.
Sure.
I mean. These knuckleheads don't realize when they're up there putting out these lists of books that all the authors are going, yeah, I made it.
That's
wow.
good. Yeah. Well, my take on this also, Carl, to sort of put your career in its rightful position, is our greatest writers, for me personally at least, have always been satirists, have always been people that have criticized the culture in a way where the culture may not even know it's being criticized. I mean, I think Mark Twain is probably one of the great examples of that. And I was reading Mark Twain when I was a little kid, and when some of it was probably not appropriate. So my point is, your satire has really provided a great service for putting this focus on what Florida is about, and particularly overdevelopment, which leads me to a couple of questions real quick. And one is this. You have certainly addressed development and overdevelopment in Florida a great deal. Is there anything and you've been a satirist, and that's been your gift, and that's been your contribution, and that's excellent. What if someone sat down and said, here, you can make the changes that need to be made? What would be the solution to our problem? I know that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Besides the obvious elephant in the room, changing the leadership in Washington. We'll leave it right there.
Yeah.
Washington and
Florida.
And Tallahassee, there has to be
exactly.
An ethical adjustment where people with voices that aren't so loud still get heard as loudly as the people with money, as the lobbyists. Lobbyists still run Tallahassee. They still run Washington. That machinery hasn't changed, whether Democrat or Republican. And as long as that exists, people with money who are here to exploit every square inch of Florida, every square inch of waterfront,
will do so.
They can get their hands on. They will always have a bigger voice in state government and at the federal level. Look what's happening with the EPA right now. They're rolling back all the. The most basic climate, not just climate warnings, but warnings about smokestack if you live downwind from a coal plant, if you live downstream from a chicken farm or a pig farm. They're just gutting all of that. And so people's lives in those, and that's not just in Florida, it's all around the country, but the people who had worked hard to clean up that stuff, who benefited from it, are now the weakest and most helpless in the system. And I don't know how to change that at this point. The structure, I mean, I think you hit on it when you said leadership. Just leadership in general has to change.
And don't you think part of the problem is, of course, that in any political office, no matter how slight or small it may be, or how high, when you start to talk about limiting development, then your adversary is going to say, "Well, you're against jobs, you're against growth, you're not an American," and therein is the problem I see greatly. Plus the undue influence that these development entities have.
Well, here's one thing I'll say, and then we can talk about something funnier. But the things they always hit you with is this development is going to bring more jobs, it's going to lower your taxes, more infrastructure. And what happens is taxpayers are paying for the infrastructure. And in every big city, the cities that have suffered the most explosive growth in Florida, whether it's Orlando, Tampa in particular, or Fort Lauderdale, Miami, West Palm, the taxes are higher than they've ever been. Mm-hmm. Cost of living there is higher than it's ever been. So the consequence of overdevelopment and cramming as many people as you can into a place is not a lowering of tax rates. It reduces the quality of life for people. And then they get there and they're stuck and they think, God, this isn't what we thought Florida was going to be.
I think we're all there now, Carl.
Yeah, this isn't what we had in our minds when we moved to Florida at all.
And for those of us that have been here, boots on the ground for a hot minute, 2 or 3 or 4 generations long now, we've seen those changes and they're offensive. And, we don't want to be like, oh, just shut the door, we can't let anybody else in here. But maybe I just privately whispered to myself, oh, shut the door, we can't let anybody else in here because, the highways and the byways have become unpassable. I want to open up the phone lines at great risk because I know there might be some people out there that would at least like to say hello to you. And I want to give that number out now if you'd like to call in and if you have a question or a comment on today's show, especially for our guest, Carl Hiaasen, please call us at 813-239-9663. You can send us a text at 813-433-0885. Emails are always welcome, and our engineer producer Jessica will read those if they're appropriate. You can send it to us, dj@wmnf.org. And you mentioned earlier, Carl, about, okay, let's get on to something a little funnier. And we're going to talk, certainly, we're going to drill down now on Fever Beach because that's why you're here. And we need to talk about that and anything else you would like to talk about. My question to you is this: while you've been on the water and you've been out there, fishing for sheep's head or just out there looking for redfish or doing just some boating out there on the water, have you ever caught one of those square groupers?
I had
ever seen one?
I've had fishing guides or friends of mine who have taken possession of square groupers that were floating.
There you go. We'll just let you look that up, listeners. We'll just let you look that one up.
And that was back in the day. Now with marijuana as available as it is and legal in most places, most of what floats up, and it's happening a lot on the East Coast here, is bricks of cocaine.
Yeah,
I never saw any of that. I didn't ever run across any of that.
That's more like Square Shark, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, just for the audience to know, I want to just get this in that Carl has produced more than 30 novels, a couple of which have been turned into scripts for movies.
Prolific.
Striptease and Hoot are those two.
Bad Monkey comes to mind.
But now you're having a big success currently with Bad Monkey. And if folks are not aware of that, it's available on Apple Plus. And Vince Vaughn is doing an amazing job, by the way, and in my opinion. Now, talk a little bit about that experience, because that's putting you in a kind of another different world.
And how cool is that?
Well, it's cool when it's a process. Yeah, I'm not participating in any of the writing, but Bill Lawrence, who's producing a Bad Monkey, has been great about keeping me in the loop. I see the scripts, I see the outlines of the scripts, and I'll make notes and things. But it's such a different world writing for even streaming TV. And what Bill's a genius at is, from Ted Lasso and Shrinking, is casting, and the casting was great.
Right.
And if you have the cast and you have good writing, and Bill and his team, they have writers' rooms that they each it's a whole different world than me sitting alone in an office, grinding out a novel. This is a very collaborative thing, and I've been lucky that they kept me sort of in the loop, and I also feel lucky that the first season turned out as well as it did. A great soundtrack. He got Tom Petty's family to let other artists record a lot of Tom Petty songs that were in the first season. And that was a big kick for me.
Gainesville native, sure.
Yeah. And it's exciting now, but it took years to do that, you know what I mean? And so people always say, well, what about the new book? And Fever Beach has only been out a couple months, not even 2, I think, maybe 2 months, not quite. But it took Bill 8 years to get, from the time he read Bad Monkey, the time to get it on the air. So I'm not sure I'll be around when and if Fever Beach or even Squeeze Me, the novel that came before it. I'm not holding my breath on those, but I'm glad that the TV series was so well liked, and I did think Vince did a hell of a job. I mean, there were other actors who had been interested in it, and I couldn't see that. I just didn't. I never do that with writing. I don't write a character and I think, oh, that'd be great for Matthew McConaughey, or that'd be great for Ben Affleck. I don't even think about it until this process starts in Hollywood where they're doing the casting. And when Bill said, hey, Vince Vaughn is interested in this, I thought, God, he'd be great for Yancey, actually. And he was. But it was a sheer genius on his part. I didn't think of it.
And don't you think the conversion to episodic format is maybe better for your work than a feature film?
Yeah, it's very tough. I've had movie scripts done on most of the books. I got at least 2 full boxes of scripts that have never been made. Uh-huh. And sometimes it was to my benefit that they weren't. But it's such a tough thing. You're talking about a book manuscript might be 380 or 400 pages long or longer, and they've got to distill it down to 110 pages for like a movie. Mm-hmm. It's such a tough thing. But with the streaming series, it's episodic. You develop the characters. The action everything can be really fleshed out and I think that's why you see a lot of big name actors signing up for these series. Mm-hmm. Now it's more fun.
It's more fun, sure.
And there's a question that I wanted personally. This is an indulgence. I wanted to get in before this show is over, and then we'll talk about Fever Beach more. And that is this: since I'm a creative person, from childhood forward, I've always been fascinated by writers and the techniques and the habits of writers. And when I was a kid, whenever there was a writer on Charlie Rose or Dick Cavett or something like that, I'm always listening to their approach to writing. And I think I saw Dean Koontz one time who says that every idea he gets, he puts on a sticky note. And the person interviewing him said, well, you must have a lot of sticky notes. And he said, yeah, thousands of them. And he said, and how do you find them? He says, oh, I know where each one is and what's on it. So my point is that I would assume that whatever you want to call that, your habit of writing or your discipline, a lot of writers write first thing in the morning. I'm sort of curious how you write. Could you kind of address that a little bit?
I go in the morning and I don't have a set number of hours. Excuse me. I kind of work at it until I'm tired and I realize that whatever I'm writing is no good anymore. If you've done it long enough, when it's time to take a rest.
Right.
A lot of it is going back and reading what you've already written. And I do that till the day that they pry the manuscript out of my hand. I'm always fixing everything. I can't look at anything I've written and not tweak it a little bit.
Right.
I don't write a whole manuscript and go back and do a second draft. I'm doing drafts chapter by chapter as I go. That's just the way I've always worked. But I have no outline. I have a pretty good idea about the characters, but not too much of an idea because I like to be surprised by the character. I love it when a character takes a different kind of tack on the page, and all of a sudden oh man, I was gonna have him get on a plane in chapter 8. He may hang around for this or something. I mean,
right.
I don't have the discipline to have all plotted out to the very end. I just don't. I don't know how it's going to end until about 2/3 of the way through the manuscript, usually.
If this doesn't work out for you, Carl, for whatever reason, this whole Carl Hiaasen phenomenon doesn't play out, I think you should make an application to the WWE, because I think you can develop some really great storylines for those professional wrestlers. I'm just saying. we've got somebody on the line that would like to say hello to you, Carl, if you'll indulge us for just a minute. Deborah in Crystal Beach. Hi, good afternoon. What say you, darling?
Hi, Deborah.
Hi, I'm from Crystal Beach, and we're big fans of your writing. I was wondering if you were going to have a book signing event or a speaking event, because I got one of your books signed and was a big deal for my brother. So I'd love to come see you again.
I don't have anything planned for that area of the state right now. I kind of finished up the book tour in Florida. The only events I ended up doing this time are they're good ones, Vero Beach Book Center, because I live in Vero, and then I did an event in Miami, and then I'm going back down there for the book fair. But I'm sorry they didn't plan anything for your area.
For the Tampa Bay area,
I'm
sure.
Obviously more than happy to. I love it when people.
Can we bird dog that for you, Carl? Would you mind if Joey and I went around and asked them?
You could ask the folks at
at the Barnes and Nobles or something.
Yeah, they have it plotted out. I had a couple of busy weeks where I was all over the country, and they just didn't bring me back to Florida in time. And by the time I got back, I was pretty wiped out. But I apologize. But thank you for asking.
We would love to, Joe and I speaking first person we would love to host you up here for a café con leche. We can go to one of our restaurants up here and kind of, we don't have the Versailles, unfortunately we don't have that up here, but we got some pretty good restaurants up here where we can
WMNF event.
Yeah, that would be amazing, and maybe we can wrap it around a book signing. But we just like to know that this contact won't be lost, Carl. With
your permission, we'll send a note to your publicist.
Please, anything you can do. That's is welcome. They do a good job, and they treat you properly on the book tour. But there comes a point, especially if you're at a different city every night, which is part of it when you're crossing the country, that you wake up in the morning and you're not sure. This is after no drinking, by the way. And you wake up and you're really not sure, okay, am I in St. Louis?
Right?
Or am I in Oklahoma City?
If it's Tuesday,
no.
You don't remember. But I think, well, maybe it's just because I'm getting older, but I remember doing this when I was young and having the same sensation and thinking, this must be just like a rock and roll tour, except with no drugs.
No drugs, no drugs.
No
groupies. And no groupies.
No groupies, huh? By the way, the other thing is, we're going to have to get to Fever Beach.
We got to get to Fever Beach quickly. And of course, as always happens, Carl, this is what happens on our show. It's been our experience thus far, is that people listen intently. They listen intently for about the first 45, 50 minutes of the show. And then here come the calls at the last few minutes. And sometimes we don't get an opportunity to get to all the callers because they wait until the last second. But we definitely are going to tack away from any and all conversations and speak specifically to Fever Beach, because that's kind of why we invited you. But again, I'll repeat at the sake of repeating myself, we're so appreciative, Carl, that you're here with us today. And it's so groovy for us to kind of meet you sort of in person and see you there and talk to you, because we know what a big deal this is for everybody, especially for us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. Thank you for the very, very kind words.
So let's talk a little bit about Fever Beach. And you have a returning character in Fever Beach?
I do. A character that was in a book years ago that I wrote called Sick Puppy, and the character's name is Twilly Spree, and he's he inherited a lot of money that he really didn't want to from a source he didn't want to, so he's decided to spend it fighting for Florida in any way he can, subsidizing lawsuits, doing whatever, but he's also got a very short and unmanageable temper. and he comes into contact with a couple of guys who are starting their own white supremacist group in Florida, because we are the birthplace of the Proud Boys, and this is a guy that's got 86 from the Proud Boys, and so he's starting his own white, and he's not the as the president would say, the sharpest bulb. I can quote them, but Twilly, I like. He's one of those. I have a few characters that I think I may not have been done with it, and then I sort of wonder, what are they doing all these years later? And Twilly was one of them, and it fit perfectly with what I was trying to do with this book.
And how did Twilly Spree get his name, by the way? Can you?
I absolutely made it up.
Osmosis? It came out of the atmosphere? Really?
Yeah, I spend a fair amount of time on names. I know it must sound odd, but I can do half of a manuscript and something's not working, a character with a certain name, and then if I think, wait, no, that's not, and I change the name.
And everything fits all of a sudden.
It opens all these doors, all of a sudden I say, okay, this makes sense. I know, but I know other writers who do the same thing, who wrangle with the names of their characters quite a bit.
So we don't know if poor Twilly is really Twillard or who he really is then in that.
That's his real name, yeah. His dad was a real estate guy, and not necessarily a scrupulous real estate guy. And his grandfather was in the mineral extraction business, mining, and left scars wherever he went. And that was the money that Twilly ended up with. And rather than giving it all away to charity, he lives modestly, but he spends it trying to save bits and pieces of Florida where, a lot of times environmental groups are way outgunned by big money on the other side. So he'll sweep in. I'd like to think there's somebody out there like that.
Come on, Twilly. We're calling on all Twillys.
The Avenger.
We're calling on all Twillys right now. So with about 4 minutes left in show, I want to get to this one caller, and then I've got a comment for you specifically, Carl, on the back side. Sarah in St. Pete, we've got about 30 seconds that we can offer you, my love.
Hi, Carl Hyacin. I love your book, Taurus Season. I was wondering if you ever thought about doing a modern remake of it with the mass amount of people moving here now.
That book.
Thank you, Sarah.
I have a soft spot for that book. It was the first one that I wrote actually with just by myself, and it was so seditious. And at the time, the Chamber of Commerce did not love me for writing it, but I don't know how it would work today, because the centerpiece of that book was the Orange Bowl parade. They were the guys in the book, the anti-heroes, I guess you'd call them, were going to kidnap the Orange Bowl queen, and now we can't do that. And Jimmy Buffett even wrote a song about the character in that book, Skip Wiley. But I don't know how I do it now. It's changed so much, but I do have a soft spot for that book, because I couldn't actually, I had trouble believing I even got it published, what's the truth.
Carl, let me add to that, that we are, again, just tickled that, you were able to come on with us today, that we had the opportunity to do this. I want to say, as we get ready to close, that we want to open and continue the conversation with you. If it's important to Carl Hyacin, then it's important to us here at The Conversation. And we like to say that, we didn't even talk about your relationship with Jimmy Buffett. We didn't get deep into the weeds, I should say, more appropriately, about your environmental activism. There's so much more to talk to Carl Hyacin about that an hour doesn't do it any justice. So would you kindly come back and see us again sometime in the future?
I'd love to do that. This is a great show. I'd love to do it, and I'd love to be able to hear more from readers. I'm sorry, I probably talked over about 5 phone calls. And
that's okay. I had 2 people contact me personally who wanted to come down here for you to sign their books. And I said, I'm so sorry. He's not going to actually be in the studio. Right. And they were very disappointed.
We're going to go out of our way to make sure that your team knows that we're going to be bird dogging in the community. And when the timing is appropriate, that we can bring you down here so you can do a book signing, and then we can go do lunch. And I'll leave you with this thought. If you're looking for motivation and your next idea, if you want to do a spinoff on 2 raconteur rascally rabbits, and you want to base the characters on me and Joe, we give you We will sign that release today.
Well, by the way,
Okay.
that event could be a fundraiser for us too, and we're always looking for funding because our public funding is being slowly pulled from us, Carl. But
Yeah, I know, and that's a whole nother story. and
that's
it's
a whole
sad
nother story. But let me also say that when you do your next book, please come and see us.
Well,
I promise I will. Thank you for spending so much time today.
Oh, you're
thank
most
you,
welcome.
Carl.
Thank you.
Don't leave us on the Zoom. We got about 20 seconds left. I'll just say stay tuned. Sam I Am is coming up next. Well, thank you, Jessica, for being our board op today.
Thank you, Shara Hill,
Thank you, Cheryl.
for answering the phones.
And thank you to our listeners who we know are out there, and they're just our favorites. We appreciate you all so much. Carl Hyacin, you're the best. Thank you, partner.
Thank you.
You're listening to WMNF